Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The United States and Israel are continuing to drop bombs and missiles across Iran, with hundreds of attacks reported in the last 24 hours alone. In Tehran, there were reports of massive explosions earlier today after Israeli attacks on fuel depots caused fires to burn for hours, spawning a thick cloud of toxic smoke over the city of 10 million people as it rained oil rain. Many residents complained they had trouble breathing as black raindrops full of toxic chemicals fell across Tehran. Officials warn the precipitation contains toxic hydrocarbon compounds as well as sulfur and nitrogen oxides. The Iranian Red Crescent Society reports 10,000 civilian structures have been damaged across Iran in U.S. and Israeli strikes, including homes, schools, and almost 36 medical facilities. Among the dead are 175 people, the majority children, mainly girls, killed when bombs struck a school in the southern city of Minab on the first day of the U.S.-Israeli attacks. On Saturday, President Trump and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth denied the U.S. was responsible for the bombing of the girls' school. They spoke to reporters aboard Air Force One.
Did the United States bomb a girls' elementary school in southern Iran on the first day of the war and kill 175 people?
In my opinion, based on what I've seen, that was done by Iran.
Is that true, Mr. Hegseth? It was Iran who did that?
We're certainly investigating.
Still investigating?
But the only side that targets civilians is Iran.
We think it was done by Iran.
But a New York Times investigation found direct video evidence contradicting Trump's claims. The video shows a U.S. Tomahawk missile damaged the school at the same time as a U.S. attack on an adjacent naval base operated by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Meanwhile, top officials in Iran have pledged allegiance to Mojtaba Khamenei as the country's new supreme leader after the U.S.-Israeli coalition killed his father, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, in a February 28th airstrike. Khamenei's ascension to supreme leader came after President Trump warned if he, quote, doesn't get approval from us, he's not going to last long, unquote. Trump said last week he would choose a great and acceptable leader after Iran's unconditional surrender. In Tehran, Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian on Sunday ruled out any capitulation to the U.S. and Israel.
America and Israel, who without any hesitation kill 168 innocent children, feel no shame for killing these children. They feel no shame for massacring 50,000 to 60,000 people in Gaza. And then they want to say that we in Iran want to kill people. We stand against those who attack our country with full force and will respond with full force.
In Washington, the State Department's declared the U.S. war of choice against Iran an emergency, allowing the Trump administration to bypass congressional approval to sell more than 20,000 bombs to Israel. The weapons are valued at nearly $660 million. Meanwhile, Democratic House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries has declined to say whether he'll block additional funding for the Pentagon's war against Iran, telling NBC's Meet the Press, quote, "We'll walk that bridge when we come to it." Iran's military continues to launch missiles and one-way attack drones at Israel, as well as U.S. military bases across the Middle East and the countries that host them. Earlier today, Iranian strikes killed 2 people in Israel, seriously wounding a third. Elsewhere, Iranian strikes have destroyed radar, communications, and air defense systems in Qatar, the UAE, Jordan, Bahrain, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia. The attacks continued even after Iran's president issued an apology for Iranian strikes on Gulf states and said Iran would not strike targets in the region. In Iraq, Fires broke out in buildings belonging to U.S. corporations Halliburton and KBR after an Iranian drone attack in Basra targeted a compound housing workers of foreign oil companies. Saudi Arabia reported its first deaths from Iran's attacks, reporting a strike on a residential area that killed 2 people. Bahrain's government reports an Iranian drone attack damaged a water desalination plant and injured 3 people. Roughly 100 million people across the Gulf region rely on desalination plants for their drinking water. Elsewhere, Bahrain's state-owned Bapco Energies company has declared force majeure, declaring it can no longer honor its contracts after an Iranian attack set its only oil refinery on fire. Meanwhile, police in Norway are investigating an explosion at the U.S. Embassy in Oslo early Sunday morning as a potential act of terrorism. No suspects have been identified in what appeared to be an intentional explosion that caused minor damage and no injuries. Lebanon's health ministry reports more than 500,000 people have been displaced in the week since Israel resumed full-scale attacks on Lebanon, with forced displacement orders affecting hundreds of thousands of people. So far, Israel's assault has killed 394 people in Lebanon, including 83 children, 42 women, and 9 rescue workers. Meanwhile, Human Rights Watch warns Israel's military has once again used white phosphorus munitions in residential areas in southern Lebanon, a violation of international humanitarian law. In the occupied West Bank, Palestinians held a funeral Sunday for 3 Palestinians killed after Israeli settlers attacked them near the village of Kirbet Abu Falah. 2 Palestinians were shot dead by settlers during the overnight attack early Sunday. Then a 3rd Palestinian suffocated to death as Israeli soldiers fired tear gas at crowds that gathered to confront the attackers. The killings bring the death toll from settler attacks on Palestinians in the West Bank to 6 in just the past week. Israel's continuing to attack the Gaza Strip in violation of the U.S.-brokered ceasefire agreement it agreed to in October. On Sunday, Israeli tank shells hit a tent encampment housing displaced families in the western Nuseirat area, killing at least 3 people, including 2 girls, while wounding 10 others, including children. Another strike in western Gaza City killed 3 men, including 31-year-old paramedic Abdurrahman Hosni Hamdouna. This follows an Israeli drone attack on Saturday that killed a father and his daughter in central Khan Yunis. Gaza's health ministry reports about 640 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli fire since the ceasefire was supposed to have taken effect 150 days ago. The Pentagon reports another member of the U.S. military has died in combat, the 7th since President Trump and Israel launched a full-scale military assault on Iran late last month. The Associated Press reports the service member was an Army soldier who died of injuries sustained during an Iranian attack on U.S. troops in Saudi Arabia on March 1st. CENTCOM also reports an 8th service member has died in Kuwait due to what officials called a health-related incident. On Saturday, President Trump, First Lady Melania Trump, Vice President J.D. Vance, and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth attended a dignified transfer ceremony at Dover Air Force Base in Delaware for 6 Army members killed by Iranian attacks on Kuwait. The price of oil has surged past $110 per barrel as Iran continues to attack fossil fuel facilities across the Middle East while bringing tanker traffic through the Strait of Hormuz to a standstill. It's the biggest spike in oil prices since the early months of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, with some analysts warning oil could hit $150 per barrel within weeks. The Wall Street Journal is calling this the most severe shock to energy markets since the 1970s. The U.S. economy lost 92,000 jobs in February, with the unemployment rate ticking up to 4.4%, according to new data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Economists were predicting employers had actually added 50,000 jobs last month, but job losses in February resulted in the second largest decline in monthly job creation since the COVID pandemic. Tens of thousands of women around the world marked International Women's Day by demonstrating against gender-based violence and calling for an end to the U.S.-Israeli war on Iran. Here in the U.S., protesters gathered at Zorro Ranch in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where the late convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein sexually abused and trafficked underage girls and young women. Protesters gathered outside Trump Tower here in New York, calling it the Believe Survivors demonstration. In France, 73-year-old rape survivor Gisèle Pellicotte led a march calling for an end to sexual violence. In Brazil, protesters expressed outrage over the gang rape of a 17-year-old girl in Rio de Janeiro earlier this year. In Peru, thousands of women marched in the capital, Lima, demanding government action against gender-based violence.
For Women's Day, what we're calling on all peasant and indigenous women is that we can't give up. We know life circumstances are very hard because climate change has devastated everything in Peru. Cities are disappearing. So what we have to do, as our grandmothers, grandfathers, and ancestors always taught us, is rise up from the dust with our native seeds. We'll keep guaranteeing life and peace, guaranteeing food sovereignty. Be strong, comrades.
The U.S. and Ecuador announced Friday they carried out a joint operation to bomb a drug traffickers' training camp in northeast Ecuador near the Colombian border. The camp belonged to the Comandos de la Frontera, a Colombian crime group made up of former members of the FARC. Meanwhile, the Pentagon says it killed 6 men in an attack on what it called a drug smuggling vessel in the eastern Pacific Ocean. Once again, the Pentagon provided no evidence the ship had been involved in ferrying drugs, though it posted video on social media showing an attack on a civilian vessel. The latest killing brings the Pentagon's claimed death toll in similar attacks to at least 157. President Trump gathered leaders from 12 Latin American countries at his golf club near Miami over the weekend at the inaugural summit of what Trump is calling the Shield of the Americas. Attendees included right-wing leaders Nayib Bukele of El Salvador, Javier Milei of Argentina. The leftist leaders of 3 of Latin America's biggest economies, Brazil, Mexico, and Colombia, were not invited. At the summit, Trump vowed to go after drug cartels and blasted foreign influence in the region, particularly Chinese economic and political interests. The summit comes just 2 months after the U.S. abducted Venezuela's former president, Nicolas Maduro, and his wife. In Nepal, 35-year-old former rapper Balendra Shah is set to become the country's next prime minister after his party secured a landslide victory in parliamentary elections. It's the first election since youth protesters toppled the former government. Shah is the former mayor of Kathmandu. He was a leader of the Gen Z-led protest movement, which was sparked by a ban on social media and driven by a lack of economic opportunities. And civil rights leaders and former U.S. presidents paid their respects to the Reverend Jesse Jackson at his funeral in Chicago Friday. Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Bill Clinton attended the memorial service at the House of Hope on Chicago's South Side. Kamala Harris, Hillary Clinton, and Gavin Newsom were also in attendance. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks for watching Democracy Now! On YouTube. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to make sure you never miss a video. And for more of our audience-supported journalism, go to democracynow.org, where you can download our news app, sign up for our newsletter, subscribe to the daily podcast, and so much more.